Okay. Good afternoon, everyone joining us today, whether in person or via live stream, and welcome to the 12th Annual Crimson Reads. This event celebrates those in the WSU community who have authored, edited, and/or contributed to books published in the preceding year. Congratulations to all of our 2024 authors, and in particular to the authors who have graciously joined us today to share their time and insights. Thank you. And this is my cold read intro, sorry guys. Grant Meyerhofer is the author of most recently Traum Novella, LRD, and Sentence Making, with new books forthcoming this year. He's a scholarly associate professor of English, teaching courses on creative writing and editing and publishing. He's also the coordinator for the English department's editing and publishing certificate, through which he started Index Press, a small press publisher that gives students and student interns direct experience working on various publishing projects. He's a faculty advisor for Landscapes and the nonfiction editor for Blood Orange Review. Kendall Prince, Katie Prince, is a recently published author with her debut novel, The Last Dreamwalker, being published just last month. Outside of 2024, but Katie's primary background is in linguistics. She served in the Air Force for 6 years as Mandarin Chinese translator. Now she's a student and fiction author. With her debut novel, The Last Dreamwalker, instead of either self-publishing or traditional publishing, she decided to launch her own publishing LLC with her two closest friends to publish their works, as well as the future publishing of other authors. She currently works in the VMAS Center as a veteran and military affiliated student representative ambassador. And Eugene Smelyansky. Dr. Smelyansky is an assistant professor of history. He teaches history of pre-modern Europe and the Mediterranean and the roots of contemporary issues. His research interests focus on the history of religious persecution in medieval Central Europe and the histories of medieval urban culture, society, and environment. Another of Dr. Smelyansky's academic passions is the study of the survival and popularity of medieval themes in the present, from politics to books, movies, and video games. His newest release, Medievalisms in Russia, The Contest for Imaginary Pasts, explores key issues for the Middle Ages in Imperial, Soviet, and post-Soviet Russia. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't ask us also to celebrate the efforts and contributions of those across the libraries and university who made today's event possible. Thank yous go out to Trevor Bond and Beth Blakesley, as well as Jenny and McKenna and ILAO. Thanks too to Shane in the development office, Linda and Karen with WSU Press, and Chris in Tech Services. Thanks to Provost Media for the live streaming, and Systems, and Alan for equipment and setup. Thank you to WSU Catering for today's refreshments. Thank yous to Research Services colleagues for guidance and passing along books to add to our LibGuide. Special thanks to Amy and Nella for the graphics and gloss on tight turnarounds and keeping us on track. Most importantly, though, I do want to make sure to thank our research assistants, Janai Johnson and Kiara Harper, for their work coming up with today's theme and planning the events from start to finish. It's been impressive watching them tackle this project that I kind of volunteered us for and bringing their talents, perspectives, and efforts to make this happen. Let's give them and everyone who mentioned a round of applause. And to those I forgot, I'm sorry. And Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. There are 37 federally recognized waterways in what is now Washington State. I think I copy and paste there, tribes in what is now Washington State. Of these, 29 are federally recognized tribes in Washington, with the remaining tribes in Idaho, Montana, and Oregon, some of which represent multiple tribes and bands. So with that, let me turn things over to today's MC, Kiara Harper.
Hello, y'all. Thank you for being here with us. I'm going to start out with some general questions, and you guys are more than welcome to just, if it's passionate to you, you can go ahead and answer. As you all know, the overarching theme this year for Crimson Reads is resilience in writing. What were some of the challenges you all faced while writing your books, and how did you overcome these challenges? What did you do to overcome these challenges?
Testing. Can everyone hear me? Okay, first of all, I want to extend thanks to Kiara and Tim for inviting me. It was an absolute honor, especially with my debut work, so thank you. Definitely experienced a lot of writer's block and issues, obstacles when penning this novel. It took about 3 years from start to finish, from breaking ground on it to actually publishing it. Large swaths of time putting it down and not being able to pick it back up again. Is that better? Is that better? Okay, so as I was saying, it took about 3 years to write this book with large swaths of time ranging from weeks to months of not picking it up. And some of the things that I did to try to get through those are firstly, rereading what I already wrote. It's a bit polarizing in the community on whether or not you should edit as you go, but I have found that if you read what's already on the page, you will inevitably want to tweak it. And if you start tweaking it, you'll probably start adding to it. So that's one of the ways that I climbed out of one of my ruts. Additionally, not pressuring yourself to write in chronological order, at least with a fiction story. Writing whatever scene is inspiring at the time and not pressuring yourself to write chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 in order if that's not necessarily what's coming naturally. So those were two of the things that helped me through my writer's block obstacle.
Those are great, by the way, and definitely something I also do. I think for me, this was a book that was kind of out of my comfort zone because it's both, modern history, right? I'm a medievalist by training, but also, I'm working on, a part of Europe, but still, like, again, not part necessarily was part of my training as a graduate student or anything like that. I think it helped that I grew up in Russia and Ukraine in the 90s. So part of that was, there was a certain cultural familiarity there. I think the biggest challenges were, again, being out of my comfort zone and trying to write quickly. This book came together in about a year. I mean, it took longer to publish, as it always does, but the writing process was done in a year, and so it was definitely the sense of urgency there, and I think, like, really, in addition to what you've said, right, about, like, rereading what you did the day before and kind of trying to I don't know, kind of inspire yourself to move on. Honestly, I've noticed that sometimes, like, starting a paragraph and then, like, calling it a day and then picking it up from a paragraph that you already started can really help. But also just in general, I think kind of realizing that what you're writing is not necessarily the final word on what you're doing, right? That it's not... I think there is always that pressure of, like, well, what if I didn't cover everything there is to cover about this particular topic? Well, someone else will, or maybe you will, next time, or something like that, right? Like, there is this understanding that, trying to do as good a job and knowing that there will always be some limitations to what you can and cannot do. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Grant, did you want to add anything?
Cool. For these, and then the other one, Traum Nouvelle, there were different kind of struggles for each of them. The one, LRD, is the second in a set of 3 books where I'm writing about bands mainly. The first book is called The Complete Lungfish, and it's inspired in a way by The Complete Angler by Itzhak Walton, and my love of the band Lungfish. So wanting to write simultaneously about a love of fishing and kind of the natural world, and then wanting to write about my love of this band. And so that first book had a particular kind of method to it. It was in these short fragments, and the struggle with the second book, which focuses on a Japanese band called LRD, or Les Rallies de Nudis. They're a band that never, at least while the majority of their members were alive, properly released an album. All of their stuff was available only via, like, bootlegs, and the music is really messy and noisy. And so with each of them, I was trying to, like, assigning myself kind of a problem of how can I write in a way that reflects what I like about this music without just being like a critic, because technically speaking, they're novels. And so that was the puzzle, I guess, for the book, while also trying to differentiate it from the other one, because I want each of the books to be different. And then with sentence making, it was a book that I had thought about for a really long time. I am really drawn to the idea of the sentence as kind of the main point of focus for, at least for me as a writer and as a reader, kind of, where I get really energized when a writer can turn a sentence in a particular way that feels jarring or different or something. And at the same time, though, a lot of the writers that I really enjoy also seem to lean into like a grammarian interest in language beyond that, and I don't necessarily have that. Like I'm a little resistant to like being aggressive with rules and that kind of thing. So I wanted to write a book that could at once acknowledge like a love of language and maybe be useful for other writers, while also not just mimicking these other writers who I've seen do something similar, but then they lean heavily on like how their understanding of language guided by like a knowledge of grammar and that stuff, which I have, but I don't really apply it to my work in a strict sense. So the writing of the book was kind of convincing myself that I could write the book, and as a result, the process was a lot of that, like back and forth, working a little bit, revising, hewing the thing, kind of paring it down and figuring it out. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Last question I'm going to ask you guys as a group. What was some of the best advice you received as an author? And what's one piece of advice you would give to other aspiring authors?
Let's see. One of the best pieces of advice I received is when I was beginning, I was definitely obsessed with the industry standard. The amount of times I Googled, what's the word count of a fantasy book? What's the word count of a chapter? How long should a chapter be? How long should a scene be? And like trying to fit my story into these cookie cutter industry standards. And the first time someone told me, you really need to stop caring. These are more like guidelines and they're there to help you, but you need to write the story the way that it wants to be written. And when I threw all of those expectations out the window and just started writing chapters to where I thought they were complete. I've got chapters in here that are 700 words. I've got chapters that are 10,000 words, and they are all exactly how they need to be. So that was a piece of advice for me that really helped me break out of my box and write the story I wanted to write. As far as a piece of advice I would give other writers, I think a conversation every aspiring author needs to have with themselves is defining their own, what success means to them. I know every author would love to become world famous and for their work to be a household name and for the TV show deals and the red carpets and all of that, to make millions of dollars off of their work. But I think a certain amount of expectation management is required, and to find ways to celebrate the little victories and own the success with yourself. Every time you make a word count goal that day, that's a success. Every completed chapter, that's a success. Finishing your first draft is a huge success. Getting published in any way, shape, or form is an amazing and monumental thing. And teaching myself to celebrate the victories, the little ones or the big ones as they come, has been important. I still struggle with it. This came out February 25th. I still refresh the pages to see the word count, see if anyone else has ordered it, see if there's any new reviews. But I have been really personally working on defining what success means to me and really enjoying the victories in big or small.
Those are all great. I think, in a way, like the best advice I ever received was from a professor of mine back when I was an undergraduate, and it was that basically that you, in order to write, you need to write. And you can chisel that block of marble or shape that lump of clay into something beautiful, but you kind of need to have the block of marble and the lump of clay before you can do it, right? And that takes writing, and then you can edit it later. So I think that trying to turn off that internal editor in you when you write. It really helps. But also to aspiring writers, something that really I realized kind of in retrospect is to put your work out there, or kind of, like, even if it's something small that might get noticed, because two of my out of three books that I've published, like two came from editors contacting me and offering me a project because they saw me talking about something somewhere else, right? So for this particular book, I wrote a very kind of short piece during COVID when I was just kind of bored, and it got published online, and the publisher saw it and asked me to expand on it into a kind of a mini graph form, mini monograph. So I think, like, not keeping your ideas kind of like under a bushel and putting yourself out there, I think, is really helpful, because like no one knows your ideas until you let them kind of you make them available.
I think for me, I mean, I was thinking about this question because, like, there are moments where someone directly gave me advice, I think, that proved helpful, but the stuff that I like, because I feel like I'm constantly searching for what other writers and other artists have had to say about working and that kind of thing. And so the thing that was really standing out to me was something that Jean Cocteau said, the French filmmaker and writer and stuff. And he said, when your first work starts to come out, pay attention to your critics. Whatever they are pointing at, cultivate it, because it is you. And I like that. Because I don't know, you're gonna have critics. You're gonna have negativity coming your way, either directly or indirectly through just like rejection or just not hearing anything, because writing is a lonely business, and every single press and journal and they're all saturated with submissions and potential projects they could say yes to. So I guess almost similar to like developing an adjusted sense of expectations, or adjusting your set of expectations like as you continue to work, paying attention to the things in your own work that like maybe somebody is telling you that it should be a different way, and paying attention to the moments when you can definitively say, I mean, as Kendall kind of said, like, no, those chapters are the way that they need to be. Those were kind of the big moments for me, like when I was in grad school, getting workshopped, and sometimes it would be like I just feel like I'm taking a real beating because I write in a particular way and I'm trying atypical stuff, and it could feel really overwhelming, and I could sit there and kind of just seethe and put my hood up and just like get excited to leave the class and listen to some really angry music or something, which is part of it too. But eventually there's this kind of calm of like, no, I knew what I was trying to do, and I'm pretty sure I did it. And that's a feeling to kind of seek out. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's already kind of been said, but for me, something that sustains me is the idea of writing as a conversation, and one that maybe unfortunately isn't as immediate as writers would like. Like, we put out a book and immediately 500 people reach out and say, hey, what were you like, what's up, like, that was amazing, I want to talk about it. It might be 100 years from now, one person is like, hey, what was this person doing, which is unfortunate, but it's a conversation. So taking in as much as you can to sustain yourself, and also understanding that like your outgoing material it's going somewhere, like even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. We're going to start with individual questions now. I'm going to start with Grant. let's address the elephant in the room that is one of your book titles. This is, oh, we got one more as well, one more side. What inspired you to create a title that has almost 6,000 words?
So that book came out on a press with. There's a guy named John Treffry who's a writer too. He lives in Kansas and he's an architect by trade, and he runs a press called Inside the Castle. And he and I kind of have a relationship where I did a book with him, first a book called Gag, and then a book called Clog, and then a book called Peripatet, and then this one. And with each book, there is this back and forth of us kind of egging each other on. And I think it's been like he's probably my best friend as far as like writing relationships go, maybe because of that. But there was a book that I always wanted to do, which is inspired by this book, A Humument by Tom Phillips, where he was kind of at his wit's end with his art practice, and him and a friend challenged each other to go into a bookshop, and whatever they could find for like $5 or something, that would be their next project. And he gets a book called A Human Document by W.H. Malik. It's like a Victorian novel, probably would be forgotten if not for Tom Phillips, and he starts painting on it. And that becomes kind of the book that he devotes the rest of his life to. He publishes multiple versions of this like beautifully painted book called A Humument. And I knew I always wanted to do a book like that. I'm not a visual artist or anything, but I wanted to like tape and glue and black stuff out and try something like that. And so that was the beginning of the project. Then I felt like there's not enough there, so I wrote this other thing that could be printed alongside the scans of that book that I mailed to John in Kansas. And then one day, because this process probably took like 2 years of first doing the kind of painted version and then doing the other version and talking with him. I was driving to Safeway, and I the night before had Googled just for fun what the longest book title is, and it's like a medical book because it lists all of these like sub specifications for diseases, and it's like 3,000 words maybe. And I got an idea of like, I'll try and just write basically like an essay title, and that'll be the title for this book, and maybe we'll get it in the Guinness Book of World Records. And I texted John, and then we both started laughing a lot. And then I thought, what if I did an abbreviated version of the title immediately after the title? So like the present title is the first word is pissant, bib, Dollar Tree parts, and then it's a long thing. And so it's P.B.D.T.P through the entire title all over again. And it was kind of like, if something is making us laugh, me and this publisher, or if something feels like unique in terms of like Peripatet, the other book I mentioned, the outside of it is a brick basically, because John, I asked him if he could do this, and he got a brick and then carved into it the title of the book. And so we're always trying to kind of push the envelope, but it more or less boils down to like, do we think this would be funny? And if the answer is yes, then chances are there's going to be a book at some point that we do along those lines.
Perfect. I love that you saw the world record and you said, "Oh, I'll just double it." How do you balance teaching students while also writing and publishing numerous books?
I think I'm hoping that I've gotten better at it, because I used to kind of see, I think because I started out teaching so much technical and professional writing courses, which I don't mind, like they're enjoyable, but even in those, for a while I felt myself kind of doing something that wasn't naturally my interest, and once, like in those courses, realizing I could teach things like, I'm a big fan of Robert A. Caro's work. He wrote a book called The Power Broker that it's got like a kind of a cult of people who are just obsessed with it. and it's a massive book that's extremely dense and full of information about this city planner from New York named Robert Moses. And I was reading it one summer, and then it started to hit me like, this could be something we could read in 402, which is our technical writing course. And that was a real revelation to me. And implementing more of that has made my teaching a lot more joyous. And I think it's also made me a better teacher, at least I hope so, where things that I'm naturally interested in are what I try to bring into the classes. So like right now I'm teaching a class called English 109, which is creative writing now, and the idea is that creative writing profs can kind of do what they like. Like Jamie Flathers teaches it as a science fiction course, Colin Chris teaches it as a poetry course, and I'm doing it on this subject I've always been interested in, which is fragmentation. In books mainly, but we're also looking at other art forms where things are kind of disjointed or broken up, because my feeling is that that's kind of how life is now, and so you notice more writers doing like books that feel less like a straight line and more like this kind of jumbled thing. Whereas when I started teaching, there was kind of a sense of, if I teach a creative writing class, we have to basically read 2 short stories a week, and after 4 weeks we're going to workshop and it's going to go this way. And I still do those things as needed, but I've learned to let my interests as a writer bleed over into my interests as a professor, and it feels like they've become kind of mutually sustaining in a nice way.
Awesome. Thank you, Grant. Last question for you is, where do you draw inspiration and motivation to write and publish so many books in such a short amount of time?
I used to think, because it kind of started after we had our first daughter, there was kind of a sense, I think at that point I had published 1 book, and there was a feeling of, I don't know, wanting to like pin down this aspect of my life that was previously kind of amorphous. I mean, I was in grad school, I had published a little bit, but I didn't feel necessarily like a writer. And so immediately around her being born, I think I published like 2 more books or something. And I think that started a process. But I've realized that writing is really my way of kind of solving. I mean, someone else said that like we read other people to figure out how they've solved the problem of being a person, and I think I've really ingested that as a way of surviving and also like enjoying my life. So I get really pumped up when I think about there's a book by Harry Crews, a Southern writer, called Car. And part of the book involves a guy trying to eat a car from bumper to bumper. And I loved that. And when Cybertrucks started to become more and more popular, I in the back of my mind, I was always thinking about like, I want to try to write a novel about a person who eats a Cybertruck. And so those little like problems, I mean, I've realized that if I talk about them before trying to write them too much, I won't often do them because I think it satisfies a little bit of that curiosity I have. But if I let them kind of permeate back there a little bit and then I sit down and try them, if the problem is compelling enough to me, then I'm gonna pursue it and try to write it. And I think I let myself get obsessed about these projects, and it's become like I don't know. I mean, can throw cliches in there about it being like a therapy kind of a thing, and maybe it is, but I really enjoy it, and I get excited about pursuing these things, and I think it's created kind of a loop in my brain that, at least for the moment, is working well enough. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kendall, we're going to go on to you. Kendall, your book is a fantasy book. What was the easiest and hardest aspect of world building for you?
Thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, I will never know why I decided that my very first work should be one of the hardest types of books to conceivably write. A multiple POV, high epic fantasy novel with so much world building. There is a map and multiple nations, languages, religions, 3,000 years of history. I even invented a language for this book. Um, And I think that a lot of it comes from, and I don't know if other fantasy writers can relate to this, but I genuinely enjoy world building. It is a great creative outlet. It's really fun to world build, sit down and create these stories that may never even make it on the page, but I know they're there. Um, and so the easiest thing about world building is just the fact that it's fun to do. So I never have to convince myself to world build. I can do that all day, every day. The hardest part about world building is some of the technical things that you just don't really think about. Like the bane of my existence is distances in land. Like I created this map and that's all well and good, but how far are things? How long does it take to travel in with medieval technology? I have a point in this book where characters are going from one town to another, and originally it was gonna take 3 days, and then I looked at my map and was like, unless I want this entire continent to be the size of New Hampshire, it's not going to take 3 days. I think it's going to take 2 weeks on a minimum. And the times and dates and timeline are really important to this book, so that made me adjust the entire timeline. There's also a lot of sailing with wooden-hulled ships in this book, so I'm like, okay, great. The amount of times I've had to Google, like, if I were to ride a horse from Seattle to Salt Lake, how long would that take? If I were to sail a boat from Florida to Africa, how long would that take? And then kind of just ballparking something realistic. So distances between spaces are the biggest difficulty for me right now in my world building. And I have to keep notes of like, okay, if this is this far apart, then that means over here it's this far apart. So
Right, yeah, thank you, thank you. So as you mentioned, you created your own publishing company, Lockwood Publishing. On that website, you have a blog. On your blog, you made a post for each character in your book as Taylor Swift songs. Where did you draw inspiration from your characters, and are there any characters that you really identify with, and or why?
um, 1 second. So Taylor Swift. I truly believe that very few accomplishments happen in a vacuum, and I have done this journey with my two absolute closest friends that they were mentioned in the opening. My friends Ashley and Bree, that are now my business partners with Lockwood Court Books Publishing, editing and publishing. And when I tell you they are the biggest Taylor Swift fans that ever existed, so they love her so much. They've gone to concerts. I enjoy her music too, but I am not on the level of my friends. There is a Swiftie soiree happening in my hometown, and we're doing that for one of their birthdays, to tell you anything. So my friend Ashley is the one that published that blog, and I really enjoyed it. And that all started because there's a Taylor Swift song called My Tears Ricochet. And we were all kind of driving in the car one day, really listening to the lyrics, and we're like, oh my gosh, that almost perfectly mirrors a dynamic of a couple in this story, almost like to the T. It's so ridiculously perfect. It's almost like she wrote the song for the book. And then that got us thinking of like, I wonder if she has any other songs that remind us of the book. And then that spread into the blog, which was just amazing. Ashley is very creative and whimsical with that stuff. A teeny tiny aside, the aspect for the cover, on a random Saturday, she showed up to our friend Bree's house in full business attire with a 3-hour presentation on her pitch, with snacks included, of why we absolutely had to do her idea for the cover. So having a really strong support system is important, I think, with any goal that anyone has. But as far as the original inspiration for the characters, they just kind of come to me. I think a lot of writers can relate to, you don't really write the story. The story begs to be born from your head. Like, it writes itself in a sense. So the characters kind of came to me. Having a diverse cast of characters was extremely important to me, so I wanted to have a wide range of different characters with different backgrounds, goals, and aspirations. With my background in Mandarin Chinese translation, Chinese culture and language was a big inspiration for the book as well. As far as characters I relate to, I like to think that I'm like the character Miri in the story, who is a young woman who dreams of joining the Scholars Guild and becoming a scholar just like her mother, and she's very passionate and imaginative and curious. That's who I like to believe that I am. But if you ask Ashley and Bree, I'm actually the character Merlin, who is an elderly man character in the book, who goes on excited, rambling tangents on whatever's exciting him in the moment. So there's a bit of debate on which character I encapsulate the most. But I believe genuinely that there's a little piece of myself in all of these characters.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that. Last question for you. Your book is labeled as the first book in this Saga of Dreams series. Can we expect to see more of you and your characters soon?
Absolutely. Yeah, not only did I choose to write one of the most difficult genres, I also decided to jump into a trilogy right off the bat because go big or go home, I suppose. So, yes, the next book in the series is going to be called Voyage of Fates, and the goal is for that to be published in 2026, and the final book, Tides of War, to be published in 2027. I would like to, emphasis on like to, publish one per year. Beyond that, I did so much world building for this that there was no way I was going to keep it at one series. So there's also multiple standalone spin-offs that will take place within the same universe, as well as other projects I have that have nothing to do with The Last Dreamwalker and are completely their own idea. I made a list the other day of potential book ideas, and I think I'm at 17 right now. So I plan to be writing books for the rest of my days if I can.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, we hope to have you at Crimson Reads next year, 2026. Eugene, we're going to hand it over to you. We got 3 questions for you. In a podcast interview, you said that in the shadow of current events, you felt you had to explore the topic covered in your book. Can you give some background on this and to what degree external factors can influence your writing process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, as I've mentioned earlier, this book was suggested to me by the publisher, who read a much shorter piece that I wrote a few years prior, and so one day I woke up to an email about whether I'd be interested to write this book, and I should write a proposal and send it back. And it took me a few days to write the proposal. I sent it back. That was February of 2022, and the book is about how medieval past is kind of used and abused in Russian history in the more recent centuries of it. And I submitted the proposal, and 3 days later, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. And at that point, you're like, oh, okay, now it's personal, right? Now, like, I have to write this book. And yeah, I mean, I think it really changed. Like, when you write about something so instrumental, and of course, these interpretations of and misinterpretations of medieval past were very much at the center. And are very much at the center of Russian imperialism, for centuries, including right now. And so, suddenly the stakes were immense, and in a way, history was unfolding right as I was writing about it. Which, again, as a medievalist, that's a new thing for me. Like, I usually write about history that happened, some centuries ago. So I think that was important, and that really made it kind of exciting and interesting to write about. And again, I mean, to give you just a quick example, so the summer before the invasion, Vladimir Putin wrote, or had written for him, an essay about how Russians and Ukrainians are the same people, and so it doesn't really matter, and they should all be Russians, and blah, blah, blah. Using a lot of medieval history in it. But again, right, like, that was him kind of misusing history, and then there is a completely different reality when he, like, literally makes it happen or tries to make it happen by, sending his troops across the border. So the stakes were high, and I think it was important to talk about it and explain, again, I kind of like the earlier point about writing, not necessarily as therapy, but kind of as trying to understand something by writing about it. And I think trying to understand the role of medieval history in Russian, or medieval past in Russian history, I think really was something at the center of this project. And also just kind of, talk about it, call it out what it is, which is, fascism, and be not mince words about it. I think that was felt very important. Yeah.
Perfect. And then on the topic of history, you teach History 105, the required roots of contemporary issues. This can be tough for some students since it is a required course. You know, you have a lot of students who are taking it who their major focus isn't history. What are some of the obstacles students can encounter to identifying and accessing sources?
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I explained it to my students a number of times. Is that like, when I write something and then when I research something, I follow exactly the same steps as I ask them to follow when they do a research project at the end of History 105, right? Like it's kind of mimics what historians do. It's just broken down in more digestible parts, perhaps. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think there is a method. I think students who kind of trust the method in a way, I think, end up following through and enjoying it more, the whole process more. But again, I mean, I think what's really important is that the skills that students emerge with, right? I mean, like most of them are not going to be historians, but they learn how to navigate. I mean, even the library, right? A lot of students we take to the library who've never been to the library of this size, right? They learn how to navigate sources. They learn how to understand, historical context. They learn how to think critically, and all of that I think, is just of immense importance, both for them as students, but also for students as I think individuals. But also, I mean, that's what the employers want. The employers want people who can think for themselves, who can analyze things, who can find, accurate information in a sea of information that's out there, right? That's not something ChatGPT can do. So I think that's an important skill that all students should have.
Yeah, extremely important. Last question for you. How do you balance teaching students while also writing and publishing numerous books?
Yeah, that's again a great question. I wish I had an answer. Staying up late, I guess, is but no, but I think like being genuinely excited about something, right? To me, brings me back to the kind of the writing table. Not that I have a special writing table, but metaphorical writing table. Time and time again, because it's like if I'm during the day. I want to come back to my laptop and write about something that I was thinking about earlier, right? That really helps as a kind of motivator. But also just sharing your ideas with students. In fact, one of the best things, and then again, it's just so happened that week when the the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, we were supposed to cover 19th century imperialism in class in Roots. And so, I talked about it and I put it or used the invasion as a kind of, contemporary example of how this still happens. And it was, I think students really appreciated because they were kind of confused and anxious about it too, hearing about it on the news or whatnot. And I think it was a really interesting moment of again, like, being open, being honest with them, explaining how I feel about it, like asking them for their questions and answering those questions. And I think that's a really productive relationship. I think that we, especially in a land grant university, right? Like it's important for us to have this kind of teacher scholar relationship where our research can be interesting to students, and can connect to things that are interesting in the world today. And yeah, so I don't know, trying to find motivation in a variety of ways, including teaching.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that's all the questions I have. Did anyone in the audience have any questions for any of the authors? I can open it up to you guys. Well, if not, I want to do one more big round of applause for our featured panelists. Yes. Thank you. I want to congratulate you guys on all your accomplishments. It truly is something to be so proud of. I wanted to thank everyone in the audience for coming here today. We have refreshments in the back. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day, y'all.